This video is a continuation of the control flow notebook, and we're going to be looking at if statements in Python. Similar to other languages, Python uses if statements to enable branching, meaning that the evaluation of a particular block of code can be dependent on a condition. Python provides the if statement, which allows us to evaluate a condition and then execute a particular block of code only if that condition is true. The statement itself consists of the keyword if, followed by an expression that is to be evaluated as true or false, such as 5 greater than 8, and then a colon followed by the body. The body of the if statement is the code that is to be evaluated if the condition, 5 greater than 8 here, evaluates as true. The body is not evaluated if the condition evaluates as false. So if I hit enter, I can enter the body for the if statement. Notice that Jupyter Notebook is providing me with 4-space indentation automatically. And so for this example, I'm going to simply write print true. And then I'm going to run the code block. Notice that when we executed the block, there was no output, meaning that the print statement itself didn't execute. And this makes sense because 5 is certainly not greater than 8. So the condition evaluated as false, and the body of the if statement was not evaluated. If we were to change condition, say 5 is less than 8, and rerun the block, now the condition evaluated is true, and the print statement was actually evaluated or executed. Now, as we pointed out in the previous section, Python relies on indentation to define a block or the body of an if statement. So the line containing our print statement here was indented by 4 spaces. If I wanted to have multiple statements within the body of the if statement, we would need to indent all of them equally. So let's say we have the following code. The 2 indented lines are a block, and they make up the body of the if statement. When we execute this code block, we see that the value of x is printed twice. Initially, it had the value 0, which was less than 2. So the if condition evaluated to true, and the body of the if statement was evaluated, printing the value of x, 0, and then adding 5 to x prior to exiting the body of the if statement, and then again printing the value of x in the last line. In addition to the if keyword, Python also provides the else keyword, which allows us to define a block of code to be executed only if the tested condition is false. Additionally, Python provides the compound keyword else if, or ELIF, which can be used to test alternate conditions. So to see this, let's look at an example. This example is going to take an input from the user using the input function. Now the output of the input function is going to be the text that was entered by the user. So we want to ensure, for this example at least, that this text is convertible to an integer. And to do that, we're going to use the int function. The int function here is capable of taking string input, like from the input function, and converting it to an integer. If it's unable to convert it to an integer, it will raise an exception. So feel free to play around with input here to see what happens. We're then going to bind the input integer to the variable x. And once we have our input integer, we're going to test to see if it's less than 0. If it is, we're going to modify it to be 0 and then print a statement stating that the negative value was changed to 0. If the input is greater than or equal to 0, meaning that if the expression here x less than 0 is false, we want to test again to see if x is indeed 0. So here I'm going to write else if x equals 0, and if so, simply print 0 in this case. We can actually add more else if statements if we like, so I can test again for x is equal to 1 and print 1 if that's the case. And if we don't have any more conditions that we wish to test, we can use the else statement whose body is only executed if all the above conditions evaluated to false. So here we're going to print more than 1. Since the only way this body can be executed is if x is non-negative, not equal to 0, and not equal to 1. So if we run this, you'll see that we're prompted to enter an integer. And if I give the value -1 here and hit enter, we see that the first condition evaluated to true, and only that block was executed. We receive the output negative change to 0. If we run this again and give the value +1 and hit enter, you'll see that the output now is 1, meaning that the first 2 conditions evaluated to false and the x equals 1 condition evaluated to true, printing out the statement 1. And of course, if we were to run this again and give a value like 42, we see that all the conditions now evaluate to false, and the body of the final else statement is evaluated, printing more than 1. Now, the else if shorthand is really a great feature if you happen to need to evaluate several options like this, because it removes the need for a lot of indentation. If we were to rewrite this example using only else statements, you get something more like this, where every else if is replaced by the else keyword, and the if is moved to the body of that else statement, which requires indentation. So you can see how this will push your code off to the right-hand side. And if you follow the 79 characters per line guideline in PEP8, this sort of nesting can make things quite difficult and impede on readability. Another reason the else if keyword is nice is that Python does not have a switch statement, unlike other languages. A switch statement chooses a control path or a block to execute based on a value. To get around this, we can use a series of else if statements, like we saw in this example, to give similar functionality. Prior to Python 3.10, some folks used dictionaries, which we're going to discuss later, to emulate this behavior. And in Python 3.10, PEP 634 provides us with structural pattern matching that also provides this sort of functionality. Now, we're not going to cover these things here, but I've given you a link in the text to PEP 634 so you can get more information on that, and that link is here. As a sort of last remark on if statements, if the body of an if statement consists of a single line, you can actually write the entire if statement and its body on a single line like so.